Hi there, and welcome back to The Journey. This week's topic is one that I find fascinating and one which I'm really passionate about. We're talking about stress. One of the ways we manage stress at Phenimmune is by dividing it into three categories: long-term strategies, medium-term disciplines, and short-term tools. Today I will build on that by talking about perception and reality and how they relate to stress. More specifically, we'll talk about how these constructs can help us better manage stress. Remember, stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's all about how we handle it that makes the difference between effective people and those caught in a downward spiral. But before I jump in, let's clarify something. Stress affects everyone. Regardless of whether you write children's books or are a test pilot, you will experience heightened levels of stress at some point. Why is that? Well, it has less to do with physical risk, in other words, actual harm to our body, and more to do with perceived failure in the context of overcoming the challenge. Let's unpack that a little bit. Whenever we experience a stressor, we quickly assess the risk encountered and measure it against our ability to overcome that risk. This happens at a subconscious level, meaning that we don't even realize that we're doing it. To be honest, most of us really sit down and do a SWOT analysis, but we automatically make this call, and deep down we ask ourselves a powerful and profound question. Can I do it? Am I capable of overcoming this challenge? Why is this a profound question? Because at our core as human beings, we want to be creative and make stuff and do things and go places and be someone. It is not in our nature to fail. But so often the situation convinces us that failure is the only outcome. It tells us that we do not have the skill or experience, so we conclude that we can only fail. That means there is a disconnect between our internal man and our false perception of who we are, so we become deeply stressed. Here is the reality. There are almost as many neurons in your brain as there are stars in the Milky Way, and that is almost 100 billion. While we don't fully understand the nature of the brain's plasticity and our ability to adapt and learn, we do know that we have only begun to scratch the surface. We know that every great journey, amazing invention, every meaningful relationship begins with a single thought. So why not make it a good thought? So how do we do that practically? How do we have a good thought or think differently about a stressful situation? How do we respond in a positive way to the stress that we are experiencing? Well, we are going to have to rewire certain processes in our brains. I want to give you two strategies to accomplish this. One is to engage and the other to disengage. Let's talk about the strategy of engagement first. Most people are spatially constrained in their thinking. In other words, the mechanics of their thought life is tied to their physical life. Do you recall that analogy I shared when talking about weight and exercise? I spoke about how our bodies are stuck to the earth and a slave to the force of gravity almost. Well, it's similar to our thought life. For most people, our thinking is tied to our physical reality. We see the physical world as linear. We see it manifest as a definite point in space and time. The sun rises, the sun sets. Seasons come and go. We are born, then we die. Things age, and nothing or no one can alter this inexorable plunge towards the end. And so our thinking follows the same path, bogged down by borders, constrained by time, limited by our imagination, because all we can imagine is what we see around us. But what would happen if we disconnected the two? Engaging in the process of disconnecting requires cerebral action on our part. We have to constantly and consciously remind ourselves of this unapparent truth, that our thinking is not restrained, that we can imagine whatever we like, and that we are at war in an ongoing battle of which thought will dominate. Next time your brain is flooded with thoughts of an impending stressful situation and you feel like you are drowning, speak out an alternate reality. I can overcome this. I will prevail. I will figure this out and find a solution. It's the start of a whole new direction. So what about the tactic of disengagement? The first strategy is one of war. It's a battle you are fighting and it's relentless. This ongoing campaign needs to be balanced and tempered with a time of complete disengagement. I'm talking about a total switch off. Why? Because sometimes we need to be reminded of the passage of time, that it can float like a lazy boat across an endless sea, that the hours and minutes can move like a slow, soothing tide, and this can be anything. I would like to encourage you to find two contrasting pursuits, one indoors and one outdoors. It can be anything from reading to fishing or chess or stamp collecting or bird watching, but it has to be something that disconnects you from the passage of time, where suddenly hours and hours have passed and it feels like only 10 minutes. When we part with the linear progression of time, it seems almost as if we are floating outside of time, and it allows our brains to wash away the cortisol and other hormones that stress brings with it. It cleanses our lens and gives us a new perspective on what is possible. It does all the things for our brain that engaging cannot do, and ultimately brings us back stronger and healthier when the next stressor comes our way. So, I want to end by giving you two challenges for the week. One, to engage. When you have a stressful thought or encounter something stressful, engage your thinking in an alternate direction and say it out loud. I can solve this problem. Remember, it's a war you are fighting. And then two, disengage. Once during the week, pick something that will occupy you for a couple of hours, where you can disconnect the phone and just disappear. You are only one thought away from changing your future for the better. Good luck, and I'll see you soon.